Hello everyone, assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry for the late start. I had a small emergency with my daughter. She bit her tongue. So let's get started now. I'm not sure if people watching have been following along with all the other live videos, but recently I've been doing a series on the concept of Tazkiyah, which, to put it in basic terms, is something akin to purification of the soul. It's a concept that pretty much all Muslims are familiar with, even if we're not familiar with the word. And it is pretty all-encompassing, which is why I've been doing several videos on it instead of just one. It's really vast. We've covered a lot of ground already. I can't even remember all the ground that we've covered because we've talked about so many different things. So I'm not going to start with a summary, because if I start with a summary, I will probably take up the entire 30 minutes talking about stuff that I already talked about. So we'll skip that part. I have a couple main points that I want to cover today as far as the concept of Tizkiyah goes. I do just want to apologize for always looking down, because I have some notes written here, so that's why I keep looking away. So I'm going to circle back to this concept later on, but basically the way to achieve Tazkiyah, if it is something that one can achieve, but in order to I'm not sure how I should phrase this, like do well at it, or fully live in this manner of Tazkiyah, of purification of the soul. You're basically focusing on doing as much good as possible and avoiding as much bad as possible. So this is good. This is a good topic to cover for converts. It's going to cover some pretty basic stuff, but it's also a good reminder for people who have been Muslim all their lives, or been Muslim for a long time, like myself, almost 10 years this February, inshallah. So we will just focus on a couple basic concepts, and then, like I said, circle back around to doing good and avoiding bad actions. So one thing that can be really hard for people to wrap their heads around, just because it's not here in front of our eyes, is trying to focus on loving the akhirah, which is, the next life after what is in this life. It's the next world. This world that we're in is commonly referred to as dunya. It's just this material world, this life that we have now. So that's one thing that people say: you should hate the dunya and love the akhirah. I don't really like to go so far as to say that we should hate the dunya, for a couple of reasons. A lot of concepts such as that, hating this life, especially to someone who is not well studied in Islam, even such as myself. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. Or someone who is new to it, it's an easy idea to take to the extreme. And what you don't want to do is think like, okay, only akhirah, so that means all I do is study all the time, neglect my family around me, neglect my responsibilities, because I should only be focused on akhirah. When in truth, in order to be focused on akhirah and love akhirah, part of getting to Jannah, getting to paradise, is taking care of our responsibilities in this life. So while we always want to be focusing on achieving the best we can for the next life, it's really important to remember that in order to do that, we have to fulfill our obligations in this life. For example, I know someone who's married to, some sheikh, some really important Islamic guy, who, fasted literally every other day, and he taught students, but he wouldn't take money from them for for teaching. Now, I think for a lot of people, a knee-jerk response to that would be like, oh, wow, mashallah, that's so great that he's not charging. But he couldn't provide for his family. He literally refused to provide for his family because he wouldn't charge for his services. Now, it is, of course, charity is of course, and giving charity is a great way to purify your soul and to work towards a good, I'm struggling to figure out how to phrase this, like a good state of Tizkiyah. I don't think that's it, but you understand what I'm saying. You're working towards purification of the soul, giving charity. That's good, but you can't do it at the expense of your own family. Do you understand what I'm saying? So loving akhirah, it is something that I have struggled to understand, especially in my early days as a Muslim. It was really difficult for me to understand, like, oh, my husband is supposed to dislike this dunya, so he should just ignore me. No, that's not what that means. Being just and kind to everyone in this world and this dunya is part of looking towards the akhirah. Loving the akhirah, loving the next life. Again, sorry, I'd be translating this for people who don't know the Arabic terms. Looking forward to paradise and loving the next world, and having your heart really focused on that is really important. And it can be difficult because, again, it's not something that's right in front of us. We're human beings. We believe things that we can see and touch and hear and observe. So it's really difficult already, for a lot of people in this world to wrap their head around the concept of one creator, of a God. And then we're throwing in things like, that's poor phrasing, but you also add in concepts like this next life, what happens after we die. It's difficult to wrap your head around and to focus on it and to try and make that a main focal point of your life. And I think that this trap that people fall into, again, is trying to just think about it so much that they neglect the dunya, and then you get on this sort of unhealthy cycle of, oh, good for me, I hate the dunya, I love the akhirah, I'm doing it right, but really you're just neglecting everyone around you, and that's not what you want to do. So it's difficult. This is not like an easy thing to wrap your head around or to execute. I think, and this isn't right. I'm just trying to relate my own personal struggles here, because to me, achieving loving of the akhirah and looking forward to the next life is almost like forgetting about it, which isn't what we want to do, of course. You don't want to forget about the next life, but if you focus on it, it's like a balancing act, right? If you focus on it too much, then you start neglecting your responsibilities here. And then if you just forget about it, then you might not be neglecting your responsibilities here, but you might slip into causing harm to people if you don't have your at least part of your mind focused on achieving something good for the next life. And it's not, and also to please Allah, not just to we're not just working towards you're not being a good person just to get a prize at the end, right? I'm sorry, I was just reading a comment. I get distracted by reading comments as I'm scrolling by. I will get back to some of these comments, inshallah. So, in summary, I got off my track. In summary, to put it most simply, loving and focusing on the next life, inshallah, focusing on Jannah, paradise, is what we want to do. But you want to not get too swept up in hating the dunya, so that you start neglecting your responsibilities and not fulfilling the rights of other people in your life. So that's just one thing. And this is again why I'm doing this small series about Tazkiyah because it's honestly so all-encompassing. Um, I'm going to address a comment really quickly and then circle back around to my notes, and I apologize for my constant fidgeting. I'm having a hard time getting comfortable. Um, okay, so someone in the comments um, is talking about an imam in Denmark who is changing Islam. And asked me to share my thoughts on it. I can't do that because I don't know who this person is and I don't know what they're doing. So if you want to share some more details, I might be happy to circle around to it again. But I do want you to know that I'm not neglecting comments, or I'm trying not to. Sometimes they scroll by too quickly for me to see. So another thing that I wanted to talk about for a minute is having good Islamic manners. A lot of the things that are good Islamic manners are just basic good principles for all people, which is really part of the beauty of Islam. When we're talking about having good Islamic manners, we're talking about, not gossiping, not lying, not backbiting, all that sort of thing. And again, this is coming back around to my sort of focal point of, doing as much good as possible and avoiding the bad. So it falls in with that. So having good Islamic manners, I mean, it's difficult for me to talk about that, and I don't mean to like say, oh, I'm so great or anything like that, but it's not ever something that I struggled with particularly. I mean, I think all of us are guilty of having bad manners at some time or another. So I do want to talk about that a little bit because, I mean, when we're talking about Islamic manners, we're not only talking about things like chewing with your mouth shut, which you should do. Please chew with your mouth shut, and not talking with food in your mouth. Another thing, please, don't talk with food in your mouth. That's gross. Gosh, can you tell the things that I really hate to have at my dinner table? We're talking about those basic manners too because we want to be courteous. Being courteous to people around us is part of having Islamic manners. But when we're talking about it, it's sort of a greater concept than just being polite. Again, is being polite part of it? Yes, but that's not all there is to it. Like, and I mean, it just keeps on coming back to this because I could talk about almost any Islamic topic and it would relate to Tazkiyah because Tazkiyah is about purifying the soul. And what's the way to purify the soul? Practice Islam to the best of your ability. This all falls in. So even when I'm not doing a series on it anymore, even if I start talking about other topics, it's still going to be relevant because it's all, practicing Islam to the best of your ability is purifying your soul. That is tazkiyah. You can relate. I mean, I cannot personally think of something that you can't relate to it, but there's a challenge. See something that doesn't relate to it. Anyway, so going back to Islamic manners, because it does, here I go again. It does seem like I'm jumping all over the place, but it is because it all relates to this concept. That's the beauty of it. So good Islamic manners. Um, I want to focus on a few things that aren't as obvious when we're talking about Islamic manners. It is easy, and this is not just something that women do. Don't fool yourself. This is across the gender divide. It is easy to fall into gossiping. It's easy. Um, and if you're not guilty, if you say you're not guilty of it, you're probably lying to yourself. I mean, we have all done it at some point, and it's an ugly thing. So remember when you're talking about someone that if you wouldn't say it to your face or to their face, then it, I mean, unless it's like because you're too shy to tell someone how pretty she is, of course you would as a woman, you would only say that to another woman, because a man telling a random woman she's pretty is not appropriate. But, you get what I'm saying. I could go off on another tangent here. I'm going to try and stay focused as much as possible, because, I mean, it really is easy to get off track with such a huge and vast topic. So there's that. And there are some issues. I've lived both in a majority Muslim country and in Western countries. So since I'm kind of trying to keep the focus kind of on converts, I'm going to talk about some issues that I've noticed that about Muslims here in Western countries. And this is all part of having good Islamic manners. So, for one thing, when an Islamic community is trying to organize like an Eid celebration, I know that there is this one. I can't remember. It wasn't a park because it was privately owned, but there was this one venue that refused to rent out the space and time to the local Muslim community, not because they were being Islamophobic, but because they had done that the year before. And the people, the Muslims, left a mess. They were discourteous, they were disruptive, they were loud, they did not clean up after themselves, they were rude to the people at the venue, like, the staff. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable for Muslims to behave in such a way. And this isn't even about like, oh, we need to give Islam a good name, or a good, we need to make Islam look good. No, it's not about that. Like, please, Allah, think about Allah. Do you think that Allah is pleased with Muslims being so badly behaved in a place that they're not welcome? And I mean, that's just one thing. Parking overflow at mosques, mosques being generally unwelcome to visitors. I mean, all these things fall under good Islamic manners. Do you think that the Prophet ﷺ ever turned someone away who wanted to learn about Islam because they weren't wearing the right clothes, or they came in with their boyfriend or whatever? I mean, that's probably not quite as relevant to the time of the Prophet, but anyway, you get the picture. The way that the Islamic communities behave sometimes is reprehensible. Um, when you go out for, if some places will book like a banquet room at a restaurant, and then they won't tip the servers, or they're rude to the servers, or again messy, won't clean up. These things are patterns that I've seen living in different Islamic communities, both in the United States and in Canada. It's a pattern. We should be better than that. So the reason I'm bringing it up is just because it's part and parcel with having good manners. And again, we're talking about doing good and avoiding bad actions. And that falls right in. If you are part of an Islamic community and you see that going on, you be the person to shame other people with your actions. You start picking up the garbage. You start helping the staff in the area, or taking around a garbage bin and telling everyone to pitch in or whatever. That inshallah would be, it's not easy to go against the flow of what's happening around you. This is a human behavior. Humans are, we stick to social groups by design, so it's not easy to go against the flow. So inshallah, if you find yourself, brave enough to go against that and to say, the way that we're behaving is wrong, then inshallah, Allah will reward you for that. And what do we do? I mean, why do we exist on this earth is to please our Creator, and to seek the love of our Creator and to love our Creator ourselves. And I'm going to ask for your forgiveness right now. I'm just going to pause for a quick second and read through a couple comments because I don't know, some people are able to continue talking and read comments at the same time. I'm not one of those people. Okay. Okay, so there's a little bit more commentary about this imam in Denmark. I don't really have any comment about that. Like, I think the best thing to do when when you see something like that is wonder, is it harmful to other people? Um, is this imam in Denmark hurting people? No. She's not abusing. She's not calling for violence. I think when we see those actions is when we should start speaking, using our voices more loudly. If someone is practicing Islam in a way that you feel is invalid, then I think that to me is one of those times where you need to know in your heart it's is wrong. And if you see people following those patterns, you can speak out and say that it's wrong. But what, I mean, I don't really have any further comment on that. I mean, obviously, as Muslims, I would not accept the fact that, I wouldn't call it a fact that the Quran is not complete. As Muslims, that is by definition against Islam. But like, what am I going to do about that person? She's not causing harm to anyone, so I'm going to focus on me and my Islam, rather than getting wrapped up in that sort of thing. I am glad that this point was brought up, because it does relate to something I want to touch on in a minute after I finish scrolling through these comments. Let's see. Someone said it's not Muslims who made Islam great, but Islam which made Muslims great. Yes. Perfect. Yes, mashallah. Well said. That's very true. Very true. And I think that relates back to, what this other person is saying. If there are Muslims who are behaving incorrectly or misrepresenting Islam, that's not a reflection on Islam. But like I said, wow, shocker. Like I said in the beginning, pretty much everything can relate to Tizkiyah. So let's kind of relate this back. So doing good. This is something from the Quran, right? Enjoining good and forbidding evil. Muslims love to talk about that, enjoining good and forbidding evil. And then there's also the famous hadith, and I'm going to be paraphrasing here because I don't know the direct translation, but the Prophet ﷺ said that if you see something wrong, stop it with your hand, and if you cannot stop it with your hand, say, stop it with your mouth. Say that it's wrong. If you can't stop it with your mouth, know in your heart that it is wrong. I would like to thank the individual who brought up this imam in Denmark, because it is calling my words into perspective for me. It's making me stop and pause and think about what I'm going to say, rather than just spouting things off, because you don't want to do that. There's been so much, and we should not fool ourselves into believing that the things that are going on now in this world, especially when we're oh gosh, now I lost my train of thought because I read another comment. Why do I always do this? What was I even saying? Oh my gosh, this is so ridiculous. Okay, here we go. So there are lots of things that are going on in the news that I think that a lot of people are saying, like, oh my gosh, this is a sign of how horrible it is. No, let's not fool ourselves. These things have always been going on, but because of social media and because of how far-reaching media can be, it's just that we notice them more. So specifically, I would like to refer to harmful actions of prominent Islamic figures. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to explode the comments, but it has come to light many times in the recent past that, Sheikh so-and-so and Imam so-and-so is doing this thing and this thing and this thing, and it's wrong. So to me, these things fall into two camps. Okay. Or that would be oversimplifying it. Obviously, it's not that simple. But like I said to the brother up thread, you need, before you do anything, to me, and this is my opinion, okay, so don't take this as some sort of like rule, but for me, what I want to do when I'm seeing someone, especially representing Islam, doing something wrong, my first thought is it harming someone? Is it causing harm? So if this is an imam or sheikh or whatever who is assaulting people, who is sexually exploiting young children or women or whoever it may be, is that causing harm to someone? Yes, it is. You speak out against it. You don't let that go. This is part of forbidding what's wrong. If you see someone who is practicing Islam in a way that is incorrect, but is not really causing harm to anyone, to me personally, it is better. And again, I cannot emphasize this strongly enough. This is just for me. It is better not to raise a huge, giant stink about it, just because if no one is getting hurt, then let Allah do justice. If someone is doing something wrong, but they're not harming people, leave it to Allah. That is my opinion. That is how I choose to function with these things. But I think that while Muslims, we really like to quote the, enjoin good and forbid evil, and then, lecture women on wearing hijab, we really have a lot of missed opportunities for things that we could really be doing to make a difference. I mean, Muslims are, I don't know the exact number, but they're like something like 1.8 billion Muslims in the world. If we were to really enjoin good and forbid evil as a community as a whole, there's such a huge difference that we can make. Um, think of especially if you live in Western countries, think of Christian churches. When a Christian falls upon hard times, they can go to their church and know that they're going to get help. And in the vast majority of mosques, we do not have such a setup. I know that there are people, women who have just gotten out of an abusive marriage and they seek help, and they have their life story dragged out in front of these strange men, and then they just kind of say, well, good luck. I'm sorry that happened to you. Have supper, you know. So I think that on one hand, we tend to abuse the whole phrase of enjoining good and forbidding evil, but on the other hand, I think there's a huge missed opportunity. And if it seems, again, like I'm going off topic, it is just because, and I'll repeat this 100 times, everything relates to Tizkiyah. Everything. Anything that you're doing where you're focusing on trying to practice your Islam in the correct way and trying to better yourself as a person and doing your best to focus on achieving the pleasure of Allah. All of that has to do with it. All of it. I could talk about, I could, this doesn't need to be a mini series. This could be a permanent series because anything I talk about will ultimately relate back to it. Because I'm not going to start talking about, oh, this is how you're going to do something wrong in Islam. Let's do it this way. Obviously not astaghfirullah. Like that's not the point of these. Anything that you do where the goal is to please Allah, that that is relating to Tazkiyah. And before I wrap up here, I'm just going to really quickly scroll through the comments one more time. I'm sorry, I can't always get all of them. Someone, I can't remember the question, but someone had a really good question last time and I totally missed it. And I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, well, women should be allowed to divorce men and marry with their own choice. Yes, I agree with that. There is a way for women to divorce men in Islam. That's a thing. Um, sorry, this isn't going to make sense if you're not reading the comments, but okay, so I think I addressed almost everything. If I missed a question, um, I'm really sorry. I think the admin of this page is really good about going through the questions when I'm done and referring you to please speak with one of our counselors, and also it looks like we had a pretty active comment section this time. So if all of you could sort of scroll through and see if I missed anything. I think someone was looking for a recommendation of a lecture series, and I wasn't able to address that because I don't have anything off the top of my head. I'm so sorry. But thank you for the really active comments this time. The bad side about that is that I get disjointed because I'm trying to read the comments and keep up at the same time. But I would rather do that than not have anyone commenting on it. I really like the activity, so thank you all for that. And inshallah, anything good that I say comes from Allah, and any mistake is from myself or from the influence of shaitan. So um, if I have misled anyone, I seek Allah's forgiveness. Inshallah, I hope everyone was able to gain something from this. And I mean, it is a difficult thing to talk about just because it's so widespread. So it feels like I'm kind of all over the place. But inshallah, it was beneficial to some of you. Excuse me. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. I hope everyone has a very pleasant Sunday. Beautiful weather where I am, mashallah. I'm going to make my kids play outside. Assalamu alaikum. It's not ending. There we go.